All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is the fourth installment of the Aptitude 2020 series. As a reminder, please mute your phones so that we limit any background noise. Today, we're excited to hear from Argon Medical Devices. They initially entered the healthcare arena many years ago as a company focused on manufacturing the stainless steel guide wires, but they've really evolved to a leader in manufacturing a lot of different areas, including dialysis, vascular tools. And so today they're going to give us an overview of some specifics of their product line. But before we turn it over to Peter Stibbs, who's going to be talking to us today and presenting from them, we wanted just to give you a quick reminder, the role that Aptitude plays and why we're hosting this. The 2020 series was set up as a way for providers to stay in touch with what's happening in the healthcare supply chain. We know everyone's busy and resources are tough and time is even harder. So we just put together a quick opportunity to learn about what's happening in the healthcare supply chain, a quick overview of products and segments that are entering the space. So we spent about 20 minutes presenting, Argon will, and then we do about 20 minutes for Q&A. So we'll have time at the end of this to have some of the discussions. For those of you who are not as familiar with Aptitude, we are a company that really facilitates the contracting exercises, negotiating happening between providers and suppliers in the healthcare industry. We do that through technology and data. We're automating aspects of the supply chain, allowing that speed to value to get there a little bit quicker. So that's it for the overview today, and I will now turn it over to Peter from Argon for today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Justin. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Let me just get this plugged in and ready to go.
Excellent. Yeah, I see your screen, Peter.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am Pete Stibbs. I work at Argon Medical as the National Clinical Manager. I'm also here with Chip Bach, our National Accounts, and with Helen Bowe from our marketing. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak specifically on the topic of IVC filtration, and even more specifically on the OptionELITE IVC filter. When we talk about IVC filtration, it's kind of an interesting subject because it's something we've been hearing a lot about in the market space. Since the 1970s, we've had the IVC filter as a device designed to prevent PE from DVT, which is a very important thing. We know that DVT has a high incidence when it converts to PE into causing mortality. But the problem that we've had in recent years is there have been a lot of litigation and a lot of issues discussing IVC filter design. We've been very lucky and very well planned to have an IVC filter that provides filtration protection that's safe, effective, that when we look at IVC filters and we understand their design, the IVC filter, the OptionELITE, specifically makes sense in why it is safe and effective at doing these things that we need to have done. So specifically, when we look at IVC filter design, there's a couple considerations that we need to look at. Such things as the material. What is an IVC filter made out of? The shape. The stability of the IVC filter within the IVC itself. And then things that the clinician specifically is going to look for is ease of deployment, ease of retrieval when an IVC filter is no longer indicated, and of course long-lasting protection. If I put a filter in place, will it protect the patient from PE? And if I need to leave it in permanently, will it keep protecting the patient? When we start looking at the materials of IVC filters, and this is the important thing when we talk about some of the issues we've read about in the news, have heard about in recent years about IVC filters, one of the main things we focus on is looking at the materials that IVC filters are made out of. Most IVC filters on the market right now are made out of three different types of material. They're either made out of nitinol, which is a memory metal. It's an alloy composed of nickel and titanium, stainless steel, and then chromium cobalt. Now, every metal that's utilized for production of IVC filters are going to have its weak points and its strengths. That's why there's multiple different metals that are utilized. I think it's important to kind of understand what each of those types of metals bring to the table. When we look at designing these products, we're looking at things such as radial force. How much force is that IVC filter pushing up against the blood vessel? The retrieval force. How much does it take as far as pounds per square inch to retrieve the filter when you're pulling on it to kind of get it and extract it from the IVC? The ability to weld the metal is important because if you're going to compose an IVC filter and you're going to use multiple parts, you want to make sure those welds are strong welds, if that's the way you're going to design it. Resilience. Resilience discusses the ability of an IVC filter to be able to handle the multiple fluxions that occur within the IVC. An IVC is not a static vessel. It constantly engorges, it contracts on a daily basis, so it's important that any device that's placed within the IVC can handle those cyclic stresses, basically the cyclic forces compressing on the filter. And then focus fatigability. You want to look at if I put specific pressure in one specific area over time, will it weaken and will it fracture? You know, we were talking about IVC filters, and everyone who's opened up the news and have read about some of the issues that have been associated with IVC filtration, we look at past generations of filters and we say, based on looking at these past generations, there's definitely been some cause for us to be concerned and to pause and say, you know what? Past generations may have had some flaws that may have led to different complications and for filter failure. Now, there's multiple different studies that are out there, and I kind of have a couple referenced up here for you to look at. But the take home on all this is that we definitely understand that some older filter models, some older designs may have been flawed and certainly may have contributed to issues that we currently have assigned to IVC filtration today, which is why it is a concern and why we do look at filters in the market right now. Examples of those type of problems are filter fracture, migration, perforation, and all those are kind of, you know, each type of metal has its specific fatigability in its failure. When we look at nitinol, specifically nitinol that's been designed and welded together, one of the things we have to look at is that the weld in nitinol tends to be weaker than the adjacent metal. This is opposite of what we normally would find in stainless steel. So when you weld pieces of nitinol together, the weakest part of that is going to be at the weld. With stainless steel and Conochrome, which is an alloy of chromium and cobalt, which is utilized by Cook Medical for their design of their filters, the one thing that we generally associate is they have a very high radial force. Anytime you look at radial force, your concern is going to be perforation. And as we can see in this slide here, when we look at rate of perforation on a filter that's designed and made out of chromium cobalt, which has that high radial force, is that you do see higher rates of perforation and penetration. There's multiple studies cited here, such as University of California, San Francisco, Cleveland Clinic, Ohio State has had multiple studies discussing this. And, you know, the concern that you have in perforation rate is not only the filter going into adjacent vasculature or adjacent organs, which can obviously cause some issues, but also even the complexities of retrieval. The more that filter is actually poking out of the IVC, the more difficult it may be to retrieve the filter trying to bring it back into the IVC. So it's important when we look at filter design, these are all kind of characteristics that we have to take in consideration. The OptionELITE IVC filter, which is made by Argon Medical, is kind of a uniquely designed filter. And it's a filter that we were able to look at some of the past generations of devices that were on the market, see where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and help design a filter that we feel addresses some of those concerns that we look for and that we worry about in some of the current designs and models on the market. The first thing you'll notice is our filter is designed from a single piece of nitinol. As I discussed, nitinol is a fantastic metal for medical devices, specifically devices that are going to be inserted into the vasculature. But the one thing that we noted when we were talking about nitinol is that when you weld nitinol together, that area where the weld is tends to be the weakest point. With this consideration, when we designed the OptionELITE IVC filter, what we decided to do is we created a filter out of one piece of nitinol using a laser cutting device. So we actually limit or minimize and completely get rid of the weld. Without that weld, without that specific section of weakening, this filter is able to actually take the forces, that cyclic forces that you worry about, and distribute it along the whole body of the filter. Thus, you're reducing any specific point of flexion, which would tend to lead to higher rates of failure. So you get rid of the weld, which will allow for an inherently stronger integrity to the filter. We electropolish our filter as well. Nitinol, when electropolished, becomes much more able to handle those cyclic stresses. It's a more rigid metal, and it has less fatigability once electropolished as compared to one that is not electropolished, as some of the earlier filters that were on the market were. The IVC filter, the OptionELITE, self-sizes up to a 30 millimeter cava with no minimum. Now that's important when we consider that on the market currently, the majority of filters only are rated to about a 28 millimeter diameter for a cava. So when you're dealing with a larger cava, that could be a limitation. Also, we talk about no minimum, and that's important as well when we deal with patients. We have no IVC filter currently that is indicated by the FDA for utilization in specifically small IVCs or in IVCs of patients that are the pediatric population. So having an IVC filter with no minimum indication also can address some of those varying vascularity sizes from some of your largest in the 30 millimeter to some of the smallest. The way this filter is designed with a flared strut pattern, which you can kind of see down at the bottom of our screen, which is a picture of the IVC filter looking up from the bottom of a column. And that flared strut pattern is designed to funnel the blood flow through the central portion of that filter by still allowing flow to go along the sides of the filter as well. So if you do have clot, it has a tendency to select the inside filtering portion of the filter while allowing patency and blood flow to go around it. Also, the way that strut pattern was designed, that if you do have clot that ends up lodging in the filter, the current venous flow that keeps passing through the filter will help break up and dissolve the clot, leading to less risk of small migration and IVC filter thrombosis. The anchoring system, when we talk about an IVC filter, the anchoring is one of the most important portions to consider. We worry about catastrophic migration. Because if you place an IVC filter, obviously it's in the vena cava. If it follows the flow of the blood, if it migrates, you worry about it going up into the heart and to the upper structures. So with that in mind, we specifically focused on our anchoring system. Our anchoring system is a curved anchoring system that's designed to prevent cranial migration. But we also put some grip stops at the bottom of that anchor and that hook to help prevent it from sliding down the IVC. Because anytime you have migration, you obviously worry about it migrating cranially, but you also can have the caudal migration that can slip down towards the iliac veins. So this was designed to keep that filter in place. We also put a small little kickstand that comes down beyond the anchor that was designed as a perforation inhibitor. When we looked at some of the other filter designs that were on the market, especially the ones that were made out of that chromium cobalt, we noticed perforation, especially long-term perforation, was a risk with those filters. By putting this perforation inhibitor, it allows the filter to grip into the wall and to fibrinize in to keep it in place, but helps prevent over-perforation, which would normally allow the legs to exit the wall of the IVC, which, as I stated, could lead to complication or difficult retrieval. We originally had our original option design, which came out, and we evaluated that design. We looked at it and we said we had a very safe, stable filter, but one of the things we wanted to do when we looked at our filter was to make it more retrievable. In line with the mandate from the FDA that if you put in an IVC filter and your patient no longer needs filtration, you should attempt to retrieve that filter. So we analyzed our filter design. We said, what can we do with our current model to create it more retrievable? So we went from our original option to our OptionELITE design, and the changes we made were basically changes we made for ease of the clinician. We ended up unifying. We had our original option had some longer legs that perforated a little bit deeper and then some shorter legs. We realized that was a very good stable anchoring system, but we also evaluated and said, what could we do to make this a little easier to retrieve but still keep all the stableness, the stability, and the ability to stay within the IVC. So we designed our anchors into a systemic 6 anchoring system that actually is all the same size all the way around. It allows for continuity of adhesion on the inside of the IVC, and allows us also that when we do go to retrieve it, these legs come in together, making it easier to retrieve all at once. We also designed the apex. We adjusted our apex design to make it easier to snare. All conical filters that are currently on the market snare from above, basically from a jugular approach. We ended up, since we don't have any welds, it's very easy to get our snare down onto this filter. We took away and elongated the neck to allow a longer running room for our snares to engage into the IVC filter, making this filter one of the easiest to be able to snare on the market. We talk about an IVC filter and we talk about filtration. It's important that any filter placed within a patient, you obviously always want to take these filters out when your patient no longer needs it. But there's always going to be a subset of patient that is going to need permanent filtration. So the key is with the Argon Elite, you have a filter that not only is robust enough to stay within the body, permanent filter, but is also designed for short-term retrieval, meeting both of those requirements. The filter system itself is a very easy to deploy system. It comes in a 70 centimeter and 100 centimeter kit. It comes with a curved pusher and a deployment sheath. It is a 6.5 French outer diameter sheath with a 5 French inner diameter, making it the lowest profile sheath available on the market for delivery. This gives us the ability to have flexibility in our placement and also allows for a smaller ratio of trauma to the blood vessel itself. The cartridge for this filter is a dual cartridge. So instead of having to have 2 SKUs, which most filters currently have to have, they have to have a jugular or a femoral system. Our one SKU can meet both those needs. So you're saving shelf space and certainly cost savings without having to have either a jugular sheath system, a femoral sheath system, or a uni system, which is available for some other companies. The OptionELITE also has a 100 centimeter delivery system. We are indicated in the U.S. for placement not only in the jugular and the femoral vein, but also via the antecubital and the popliteal. This specifically comes into play when we talk about performing procedures for DVT, for a single popliteal axis, so you no longer have to flip your patient over. You can all do it from the same axis, or from upper extremity. If I'm placing an axis in an occluded jugular or femoral where I would need to use an upper extremity access, such as the antecubital vein, I'm able to transition with a long enough sheath. It's a low enough profile to provide atraumatic delivery within that vein. And also it has some advantages with the fact that we can place through that same access site a PICC line or access line to leave in place for venous access. Over the wire delivery, our system also is able to be delivered on a guide wire. No other system currently on the market in the temporary and permanent filters can be delivered this way. You can use your same existing guide wire you use for your procedure, your working guide wire, and deploy this filter right on it. This allows for straighter delivery via the femoral access and allows you to continue working in patients where perhaps you're placing filters for DVT thrombectomy or in trauma patients where you need to go in and place venous access, central venous access. You can leave your working guide wire right in place and continue your procedure without having to exchange out. We do, like I said, we are cleared for the popliteal access delivery. We are the only IVC filter currently on the market within the U.S. That's a temporary and permanent filter that does have that indication. Specifically, this is a good indication when we consider DVT and thrombectomy. As stated, you no longer have to access the jugular and femoral, place your IVC filter, then flip the patient over, re-prep and re-drape. You can go right through the popliteal axis, which is where you're going to be working anyway to perform the thrombectomy procedure. It saves time, it saves money and supply, and it's safer on the patient. You don't have to flip a patient that's sedated over. You keep them all on the same plane for performance of the IVC filter procedure. Proven performance of this filter. In the end, when we look at an IVC filter, you want a filter that's going to be safe to the patient. You want a filter that's going to do the job an IVC filter should do, and one that you can feel confident that if you have to leave it in place, it'll continue doing its job safely and effectively without major complication. We have multiple studies that are out there on the Option IVC filter that can attest to the safety. Specifically, I have demonstrated here an IVC filter study, which is our initial clinical trial study, as well as a study from Mass General Hospital. When you look at IVC filters across the board, functionality, migration, fractures, the OptionELITE is one of the lowest rates of complication on the market. When you compare filters side by side, number to number, you'll find that this is one of the lowest complication rates for a filter out on the market. Here's some more performance data from Cornell Medical Center. Maine Medical showing no migrations, no fractures, and no symptomatic PE with high retrieval success rates. All these things are things you want to look for when you're looking at IVC filtration and you're looking for an IVC filter that meets needs for the clinician and certainly for the safety of the patient. With our IVC filters, one of the main concerns we talk about in placing temporary filtration is we want to make sure that we're recouping these patients back. Every clinician will tell you their one main concern not only is the safety of the patient, but how do I get these back into my facility so I can ensure that I'm removing these filters when they're no longer necessary. Argon has made that a concern of us as a company, and certainly is a concern to partner with the physicians and with the clinicians and the healthcare institutions in recouping these patients. We have multiple literature. We have a filter follow-up program that helps IVC filter clinicians recoup these patients and bring them back in the facility for safe and effective retrieval of the IVC filter when the time comes. In the end, when we talk about a filter, we want to look at something that's going to have consistent performance, safety, efficacy, and the option's been on the market for quite some time, since 2013, showing all these different variables that you look for in an IVC filter. We have a unique apex design, a one-piece nitinol system for resilience. We have a unique anchoring system to help prevent that migration and that filtration, and a low-profile system that reduces the trauma to the access site. In the end, when we talk about IVC filters, and we want to partner, as a company, we look at partnering with facilities and with clinicians to come up with the safest products possible for our patients with the best clinical outcomes. With the OptionELITE filter, you have a clinical and economic value. It's a single SKU. It's available for both permanent and retrievable utilization. We have high compliance utilization with this filter due to that very fact. We can supplant and be your one source filter to provide for temporary filtration, and then permanent if it does need to stay in place due to the rate of safety and minimal complication rates proven in multiple clinical studies. It's a safe and proven efficacious design. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the ability to be able to present our OptionELITE filter to the members that are on this phone call. And we would like to open up the floor for any questions that may be out there for us.
That's great. Thank you, Pete. Well done. Appreciate you walking us through this. And I know I've learned a few things or two. And you know, while we let folks kind of put together maybe a question or a follow-up, you know, I liked where you were talking about your the studies that you've done with Ohio State, UC San Francisco. You used some examples there. What has been kind of the you know, when you're approaching a hospital or a member, what is it you're kind of going in and say, this is what others are seeing? What's the, you know, kind of primary benefit that you're pitching today?
When you're looking at, you know, IVC filters in general, especially on the market right now, it's obviously a touch point topic for every hospital and every clinician, because we do hear about some of these complications in the filters that have been left in place, some of the earlier designs of filters. So our one thing that we like to stress most of all with this product is you have a design that's safe and effective. It is one of the lowest complication rates on the market for all the things you worry about in a filter when you place it: migrations, fractures, perforations, thrombosis rates, the things that are going to cause problems and issues for your patient. That's what we're worried and concerned about the most. There's also some advantages to this filter, obviously being a one SKU system. You don't, as far as from a logistics standpoint, you don't have to have two different SKUs on the shelf. With this one filter, you have 4 different access points to place it, so it literally can be kind of the one-stop fill for all the needs for IVC filtration. And because of its safety, its efficacy, and the clinical data that's out there, if you do need to leave this filter in place, you can feel rest assured that you placed a filter that's one of the safest on the market and can function in a permanent filtration mechanism very safely and effectively. So it allows you to supplant, you know, having to have a permanent filter option versus a retrievable option. Just kind of really resilient and kind of fits all those needs in one device.
Great. Excellent. Are there any other questions out there? I know we didn't have anyone on the chat feature. You can use that if you'd like, or just ask a question. Anything to clarify or follow up on?
Justin, to add on, this is Chip Bach with the National Accounts for Argon. One of the things I wanted to just kind of add on to or reemphasize, because obviously when we're going in, we're working with a lot of the supply chain and the health systems. And we're talking, you know, large health systems, 30, in some cases 30, 40 hospitals spread across large geography, multiple states, et cetera. We've had a very high success rate, and when I say success rate, I'm talking 70% to 80% commitment level or higher in standardizing to the Argon filter for all the reasons Pete already covered in the presentation. But again, also because that single SKU, and most importantly, the filter for the clinician, the physician that's actually putting in these filters, for the first time for many of them, this has been the opportunity for them to all kind of agree on one filter that they can all utilize. So it's not a matter of being different or better than maybe what they're using. It's the fact that they can use this. It has that single SKU. It's very safe, it's easy to retrieve, it's easy to deploy, and that's what's led to these high levels of standardization we've been able to achieve, which of course obviously then drives economic value as well.
Great. Good clarification. Appreciate that. All right, we'll do a last call for questions. If anyone has anything, go ahead and ask it now. Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone attending our fourth. And guys from Argon, really appreciate you taking the time to educate us on what you guys do and the value of the products you're bringing to the market. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate the opportunity.